All right, back with another episode of SF 9-to-5ers, that successful former 9-to-5ers. You listen to Real Entrepreneurs TV, where we have our mission to equip, empower, and encourage aspiring and current entrepreneurs. Very excited about the guest we have today. Ms. Lauren Coleman, very good friend of mine, serial entrepreneur, has a phenomenal story. We want to make sure that you're prepared to listen, and hopefully it resonates with you. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. How you doing, Ms. Coleman?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good, pretty good. You want to tell the audience a little bit about, so first of all, our audience is people that are aspiring to either leave their job or start their own business, or have already left their job and are currently in the midst of their business, and they're trying to get to that next level, right?
Mm-hmm.
So where are you at right now in your entrepreneurship journey?
Well, I mean, I am a full-time entrepreneur. So my only income is generated from what I'm able to put on the table. Right now, I'm looking to continue to grow. Definitely want to transfer from so much active to getting definitely more passive income. Right now, I have a growing early childhood education center. So we service kids from 6 weeks to 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Looking to continue to create a model that can be replicated. Down here we have a STAR system, so trying to basically put in a formula to show people how to open up early childhood centers that are not only, financially sustainable, but programs that service kids in a way that you're able to tap into all the different grants and money that come with high performance centers. Okay. I'm also an author. Feels a little weird to say that, but I have written a children's book that I feel really passionate about. And then I'm entering.
What's the name of the children's book?
Why Are They Kneeling?
Okay.
So that's a children's book that I wrote. I felt like there was a gap in the market for kids who are growing up in a society where there's so many questions that they have that are not traditionally answered by most children's books. So it's a lot of fairy tales, a lot of different things that we teach our kids through parables and stuff like that. But our kids are so tapped into what's going on around the world that when that Colin Kaepernick situation happened, there was nothing to address on a kid level the importance of that historic moment. Our kids are growing up around so many different things that are going to be historical moments, and I think sometimes we're losing the opportunities to educate them on the importance of what they're seeing.
Gotcha.
And then the last thing, in my former life, I was a educator, so certified teacher for about 12 years, school administrator, always working in secondary settings. And so putting all of that information that I learned into books and things that can be handed to the next generation of educators on to help offset some of the learning curves that I had trying to be a good teacher. Right. So, yeah.
And that's a product or something, or is that a one-on-one?
So I'm actually, I just finished writing, I call it the Teachinary. So, okay. Dictionary is like a book that has access to all this information, defines things. Education, there's so many educators out there, there's so many different words and jargon and phrases that people come up with. And so, oftentimes, like in any industry, you have all this industry specific language, but nobody has shared definitions. So it's an attempt to not only, identify the shared language inside of that industry, but also create some shared definitions so people are on the same page. So
those are three different avenues that you're involved in. So let's backtrack.
That was a lot, yeah.
What started you becoming an entrepreneur in the first place?
So I think for me, it wasn't like a one particular moment, but I think it was just a journey. For me, since a very young kid, most of my things that I needed have been burdened placed on me.
Yeah.
So I was always a kid that was kind of responsible for making sure that I was okay, taking care of myself, getting a lot of the things that I wanted. And then from an early age, I guess you kind of out of necessity figure out, what you're good at. And for me, I was good at selling things. I was good at figuring out a gap and addressing it. Not always in the most legit fashions, but through life and different things and wisdom, I've now got on a complete legit path, but it just helped me kind of just like identify some skill set that I had. So yeah, I was always trying to sell something, trying to figure out the next way to get something. And as I got older, it felt good to depend on myself.
Yeah. So do you think entrepreneurs are created or born?
I think it's a bit of both, right? I think some of it is already in you. So naturally, if you are just a person who can identify a gap and address it, I think that comes on as something that you're born with. But I think if you don't pair that with education, knowledge, if you don't continue to refine yourself, then you'll never be a successful entrepreneur.
What type of education, just so people don't get confused?
I think definitely not. I don't. Formal education on the list is maybe number 20. I think just experience. I think being able to constantly operate in a reflection mode where you're always, identifying something, figuring out how you could be better, how you would do things differently, accessing books, going to YouTube University, as I call it, constantly getting your master's and your PhD from YouTube and other, sites and platforms that give out all this free information, and just constantly being in a growth mindset, figuring out the people and the resources and the books that you could tap into to constantly evolve as a leader, as a person, and then also learn, things inside your industry that you wanna capitalize on.
So you would say self-education is way more important than formal education?
Oh, absolutely. I think formal education, and that this is me as an educator, I think formal education is created to make good employees. So I think once you decide you want to be an employer, it's really hard to get the information that you need because everybody inside of formal education is an employee. Now they might be an employer as well, a side hustle or something like that, but for the most part, you're learning from employees, and their goal is to make you a good employee. So I don't know if formal education is I don't know. I feel like formal education is not for people who want to be employers.
Gotcha. So, and I think this is a good segue. So tell us about, because you're a successful former 9-to-5. Tell us about that, your previous work life.
As far as what my day-to-day responsibilities or?
What did you do? What was your last job like?
So my last job, I was a high school administrator. I was responsible for the curriculum and instruction of the building. We serviced roughly about 1,000 students, and I supervised roughly about 150 staff and personnel.
Got it. So that feeling of entrepreneurship was still there during that work experience?
I think that, for me, so I was always a person that had a side hustle. So I've never not had another way to make money outside of my traditional 9-to-5. But now that I am a full-time entrepreneur, I wouldn't, no disrespect to anybody listening, but I wouldn't necessarily allow myself to put that, entrepreneur word on what it was that I was doing, because there's a lot of things that you don't take into account. Entrepreneurs are not confined by fear or other things that you say you might not have, but when you are getting a check every 2 weeks, when somebody else is telling you where to be, how to be, there's a different mentality. So I was doing other things, but my mentality had not yet shifted, which I think is the most important part of an entrepreneur. I think, we define that word a lot of different ways, but I think your mentality is the number one indicator of if that person is an entrepreneur or not. And it's hard to have that when you know when your check is coming from, you know what time you have to be at work.
Yeah.
And you have other people managing your day to day.
Tell us about that mentality.
It's a paradigm shift. I mean, you literally see things the exact opposite as somebody who is not.
What you mean?
So, you know, you feel like, you know, for a long time, I've been on my own since I was a teenager. And you feel like, you know, I'm like this adult. I take care of myself, but you are essentially managed by other people. You know, they tell you when to be at work. They put the value on how much your work is worth. They, you know, they give you your sense of urgency and all these different things. I think when you have an entrepreneur mentality, you start to see certain things in an opposite light. So when you're a 9-to-5er, you see security as a great thing. An entrepreneur sees freedom as a great thing, you know, and that can really put you in shell shock almost the first time you don't know where your check's coming from.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs operate in a lot of uncertainty. And in 9-to-5 world, that's not a good thing. You want to be kind of, you know, have an idea of what you want to do.
Right.
Entrepreneurs, we are, even though as an educator, I had to constantly evolve and, you know, meet the growing needs of different kids and education changes, but I was still in a box, right? Entrepreneurs, you gotta like be completely adaptable.
So tell us about the moment, describe the feeling in the moment when you knew that you were about to be separated from your job and entrepreneurship was your next step. Was it a day? Was it a week? Was it months leading up to it? Describe the moments leading up to that. And
I think the first time your direct deposit doesn't hit. You know, I think that's when
put us in the mindset of while you were still employed.
Okay.
The day that you knew that following day you were gonna be an entrepreneur. Describe that feeling before that.
Oh, I think fear.
Okay.
Panic, anxiety, nervousness. You know, you sick to your stomach. You know, it's like, what am I gonna do? And then you realize, just like an addict, you have this extreme dependency on other people, on other systems. You realize for the first time that, you know, even though you're an adult, you really weren't managing yourself, right? Because now you don't have this confined amount of time, but you still have to be productive. Yeah. You still have to make things happen. And so I guess I would equate it to like taking a small child and throwing them in the ocean. You know, it's a lot of things you gotta figure out very quickly. How am I gonna swim? How am I gonna float? How am I gonna survive? And so for me, yeah, I think it was just like the most extreme fear that you feel. And either you're gonna paralyze and stay stuck, or it makes you just go get it.
Yeah, so what advice do you have to that person that is in that same position today, right? They know tomorrow is that day. Or if there's wind of layoffs, like I'm not getting another job. So what is your advice to the person that's having those same exact feelings right now?
So I think if you're in a situation where you're creating a date where you're going to be an entrepreneur, I think you just got to understand it's never going to be a perfect time. Things are never going to work out. Like, don't convince yourself that there's going to be like this perfect situation or a day where you're no longer swimming against the current. I think that you just gotta, you know, the current is always going to be there. You just swim better. So I think, you know, uncertainty will always be there. Even, you know, even if you become a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, there's uncertainty. You know, look at this coronavirus happening right now. Your stock prices might drop. You might have unemployment makes you have a low, you know, pool of people that you can employ. So there's always going to be a current.
Yeah.
You just got to learn how to swim better. I mean, that's just it. So I think we're looking for this cookie cutter, easy, perfect moment, and it's just never going to happen. So it's just about deciding, which one do you value more, security or freedom?
Mm-hmm.
And if you value freedom, you're going to have to just jump off the ledge. And know that there's going to be a combination of, hard work, education, and God that's going to make sure that you don't hit the cliff.
Yeah.
That's
so
it.
what tools help you overcome those feelings of terror, anxiety, and fear, right before you made that leap?
I don't think it's a tool. I think it's the fear itself. I think
so fear is the tool, and you have to make it positive.
I mean, well, I think when you allow yourself to be scared, you slowly start to see it's not that scary, if that makes sense. So
what you mean?
The fear loses its bite. Like you're super scared of something, and then you do it and you realize, oh, it's really not that. I was scared of fear, but now that I'm here, it's really not that bad.
What's the example of that?
So my direct deposit. when you it's crazy because now, when I work 9 to 5, I check my bank account constantly. The 15th and the 30th, I was checking my account. I was making sure my money was there. I operated my entire life around the 15th and the 30th because I was somebody who essentially lived not check to check, but I wasn't that far out. So, I would purchase things around that time. I would do everything around these 2 days that I know were coming. Now I don't even check my account like that. Because it's no longer something that feels like this, ball and chain that I'm connected to.
Yeah.
So I think, you could read all the books you want. You could network with all the people you want. There's nothing that's going to prepare you for this feeling other than the feeling itself. And then when you feel that feeling, who you are as an entrepreneur is going to emerge. So if you're somebody who's going to get it regardless, you will get it. And the only way for you to know that is to just jump. I think it's like almost asking somebody, like, what can you do to prepare for a child? You could buy the car seat,
ready.
You could read the book, you could talk to other parents, but none of that is going to prepare you for a child. You just got to have one. Yeah. So I think the same with entrepreneurship, you can do your due diligence. You don't want to just jump out here first, but you also got to understand, like, the only thing that's going to truly prepare you is just to do it.
Some people say that your business is your baby. What would you say? How true is that? I
mean, it is. It's the thing that, at times your child gonna eat and you're not. So it's definitely and it's something that you love. It's something that you are willing to do a lot for. Yeah. And so I could see that parallel. But eventually you're gonna want self-sustained kids. So that's like the goal of the entrepreneur, right? You have this infant that needs you every day, and you got to do all this stuff for it. Yes. And then eventually you're gonna be looking at it and saying, okay, it's time for you to, like, do some things on your own. So I think that's where I'm at in the process right now. Like, I've had the infant, it was cute, it was adorable. Now I'm looking to figure out how to transfer some of these things into, like, teenagers. Right. I want them to be able to do things on their own, So gotcha. Yeah.
Now remember, our purpose, successful former 9 to 5, is to encourage, educate, and equip. So back in hindsight, right before you quit, right, trying to get to that next level, what equipment do you think you what equipment would have helped you make that transition better? So when I say equipment, could have been support, could have been tools, could have been a network. Was there any equipment, physical, mental, or spiritual, that would have helped that transition a little bit better?
Well, I'm always gonna say, God is like everything, right? So for me personally, a strong relationship with God, that's going to put everything in alignment for me. It gives me a better understanding. It makes me calm in tumultuous situations. It gives me a wisdom and a level of peace that I wouldn't have if I was just doing things on my own. I think a network, you know, one of my good friends who happens to be owner of this podcast, I actually learned that from him. But, you know, Black people, we and I think it's because we've learned this, because we often are forced to do things on our own. We have a I'm going to do it by myself mentality. And as an entrepreneur, sometimes you'll be forced to do that. But I think a network is one of the most valuable things you can have. And not necessarily somebody who's going to like front you the money or put you on, which is what we like to get, but somebody who could just give you the game, you know, like tell you the steps, and help you see things from a different perspective. So guide, a network, information about the thing that you're trying to do, self-discipline, because without that, it's very hard. You know, there's no boss looking for you when you don't show up to work. You got to just get up on your own. And then the fifth thing is money. You know, we downplay money.
Well, what you mean by money too? So in our space, entrepreneurship, what do you mean by that?
I think it could actualize in different ways depending on your industry. It might be actual cash, it might be equity, it might be, you know, human capital, bringing an idea to a table, or, you know, a set of skills that can add value to your relationship or partnership. But you got to have something to put on the table, and so that can look different depending on what you're trying to do. But that would be my top five. God, networks, self-discipline, information, and capital.
Right. Yeah. So the aspiring entrepreneur and a current entrepreneur trying to get to the next level, how has your perspective changed on networking, right? Because when you're in a job, it's kind of like, this is what I do, this is what you do, call me if you want to. But when it's you, everything's starting to start with you. How do you approach and view networking now?
I mean, you gotta kind of just see like everybody as a walking book, right? Like, you know, like everybody has information that can either speed up your process, slow down mistakes, help you avoid certain things, help you give access to certain things. Like everybody has this wealth of information, and as an entrepreneur, you know, you got to tap into those things. There is not one entrepreneur that you can find that was able to build something on their own. And so seeing the value in people has to change, because you can't do anything by yourself. So even though you might have this crazy vision, who's going to execute it? Or you have the ability to, you know, execute something, but you don't have the vision. Like, it's always going to be a missing component there. So,
like a puzzle.
Yeah, exactly, like a puzzle. So seeing people in that way helps you shift what it is that you want to do. And then as you build things, like you want, just like you referenced earlier, your child is your baby. So you want to make sure your baby has everything it needs. And so figuring out how to tap into people and into different circles is going to allow you to give your business, your baby, the best opportunity to grow, you know?
Yeah, that's good. And describe some practical ways to be self-disciplined, right? So remember that you almost trained with the direct deposit, just like I was. So self-discipline is not only with money, but describe how someone could come up with a routine or apply self-discipline or improve their self-discipline. Just trying to make it practical for the person that doesn't have it or needs more of it.
I think just like, you know, when you sit down as an entrepreneur, you write down all these goals for your business. But you also got to write down goals for the person who's going to be in charge of that business, which is yourself. So You know yourself, you know your strengths, you know your weaknesses. The same way you evaluate your business, the same way you write a business plan, you might have to write a personal growth plan.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, what are your financial goals? What are your time goals? Like, do you have deadlines for yourself? So, you know, we'll say, I want my business to make $1 million in the first 6 months. Well, how are you going to do that? Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, how much time, how much of a commitment does it require of me to generate the things that I want my business to generate? And then you backwards design and you give yourself parameters. So, you know, we see ourselves and we'll say, I want to be an entrepreneur because I want to be able to do what I want to do. That's a very big false misconception. I used to tell my kids when I was a teacher and administrator, you know, and I still believe this, you get 2 choices in life. You either get to do what you want to do and not have what you want to have, or you get to have what you want to have and not do what you want to do.
Damn,
that's the 2 options. So, you know, we see ourselves and we glorify this entrepreneur, but it's like, nah, if you want this, then you're going to have to do what you don't want to do consistently. You're going to have to get up. You're going to have to clock in to yourself, right? You're going to have to set parameters, set goals, set deadlines, and then hold yourself accountable, just like a boss would. So your boss is not saying, oh, you didn't hit this deadline. Well, I understand you were tired, or I understand you wanted to go do something else. No, they held you accountable. So, and for the most part, if you were a successful employee, you hit all those goals that were set out for you, and most of the time you exceeded them. But sometimes we're not willing to give ourselves that same level of commitment. So you got to sit down and just like you plan out your business, you got to plan out the things that you want for yourself, and almost separate you into, you know, like you got to almost see yourself as your first employee and manage yourself accordingly.
Yeah. So how can we make ourselves more accountable? Because that job had an organizational chart that made you accountable.
Right.
So when you are the organizational chart or creating that organizational chart, what's some practical ways to make yourself accountable?
Well, I think, like I said, like you write the description and the performance metrics for the person who will run your business as if it wasn't yourself. So if I was hiring a CEO for the business that I want to create, what would I require of them? And then you put that on yourself. So you treat yourself the same way. So if I say that, you know, in order for this business to be successful or for this idea to actualize into a tangible thing, I need somebody who shows up to work between these hours. I need somebody who's able to commit this amount of time, this amount of resources. I need somebody who's going to educate themselves this amount of time throughout the week. Like all those things that you would put on paper for the CEO that you would hire, you got to put those things on paper and then hold yourself accountable.
And because this is a no excuse zone.
Absolutely.
Real Entrepreneur TV is a no excuse channel for the person that says, I don't know what that description is. I don't know how to find that description. So I'm gonna just wait, right? How could they get the answers to those questions?
I got you. So I believe in backwards design. So you first start off with your big goal, which is what are the goals you have for your business, right? What's the growth you want to see over a year? Break that down into months, break that down into days. Financially, what do you want your business to be? Break that down into months, break that down into days. And then slowly but surely, you'll start to create the daily actions that it takes to match the outputs that you want. So if you're saying, let's say you started a t-shirt business and you're saying, I want to make this amount of money a month. Well, that equates to 3 shirts a day, right? Well, my output then becomes, I want to sell 3 shirts a day. Well, that means somebody got to sell 3 shirts a day. So then what does it take to sell 3 shirts? I have to contact people. I got to, develop my marketing, but then I also got to hit the streets or post them on Instagram, and I got to sell 3 shirts a day. Well, now you have your job description. It's all the inputs that it takes to make sure that output is matched. So I think sometimes we get very overwhelmed by making these macro goals, and we forget what it looks like on the day-to-day, right?
And I think that's where you can plug and play networking.
Yeah.
Right. So if that part of your business is overwhelming and it de-energizes you, I think that is the point to where you need to stand side by side with either a consultant or somebody in your network that's their warehouse. All they do is create those key performance indicators, those metrics. All they do is process, map, and systematize, and you stand side by side with them, and it'll be a mutual exchange of value.
Right.
Like, I'm good at big picture, I'm good at ideas, sales, marketing. You're good at putting the actual nuts and bolts together, and that marriage makes an engine and makes the car, run that much faster. So I completely agree with you on that one. We just want to make sure that everybody is educated and equipped so that, excuse me, are no excuses at all for you to get to that next level, right? Cash, right? For that person with excuse of, I can't get started or I can't get to the next level because of cash. Now, throughout your career, how has your perspective changed on cash and how it's used and how it's handled?
Well, I'm never gonna be the person that says you don't need any cash. You always need something. I think one, entrepreneurs, and I'll speak for myself specifically, sometimes we get very emotional, right? We're passionate people. We're very emotionally connected to the thing. I think one, being very objective about what it is that you want to do, and put like some hard numbers down. You're never going to get to a place where you can say, well, I don't need any cash. Even if your business needs cash or it needs equity or it needs something, write that number down and then figure out a plan to get it. Business is not always a straight line. So let's say I decided I have this great plan and I'm going to need $40,000 to execute it. Well, you got a few options. You can, if your credit's not good, you can't get a loan. You weren't born into wealth like many of us, and you can't tap on somebody to get it. What are you going to do? So I think there's a lot of options. You can either develop something to generate that money, networking, tapping into people who are, wanting to invest in an idea, monetizing your human capital and the expertise that you have to generate funds to work towards that. But I think, we always looking for a straight line because that is how 9 to 5 works. Sometimes you got to go in circles a little bit. So I think putting the number down and then figuring out what I'm going to do to get it. There are maybe about 2 or 3 businesses that I have right now that I want to do that I know are $1 million ideas, but I haven't quite figured out how to get the money for them. So on my timeline of events, they're not happening right now, but I'm doing other things to generate that money because I know I'm going to travel back to that idea. So I think, being so committed to just one thing is definitely a fault. It's definitely emotional sometimes that we do. And I think sometimes you got to like open your mind up. And then on the sidebar, I think a lot of people tell you all the time, like, find the thing that you're passionate about and make money off of it. And I used to it sounds really good when you say that, especially like to kids and stuff. You're like, oh, find the thing you're passionate about, make it a job. Yeah, I can see how people say that, but I've actually worked very hard to separate what I'm passionate about and how I make money. Because sometimes that could really mess up your judgment because you're sitting on this idea and you really want it to work, but objectively it just doesn't.
How did you choose the business or the businesses that you are into now?
Well, I think everything that I have right now is connected to my passion, right? I'm very passionate about education, about children.
Okay.
I have been very intentional as I start to move into other lanes to look into things that I have no passion or connection to, because you're able to make better decisions, I always say, I don't know where I get this box company from. It's not a real business, but you know, like to have a box company has to be a very freeing thing. I don't care about boxes enough to not make a smart decision about the bottom line. And so I think sometimes back to that money question, sometimes we're so passionate about something that it clouds our judgment. And now we're trying to raise money for maybe something that doesn't even work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's always a way to make money. So if you can't figure out how to make money with that, step back and make money some other kind of way. I know that sounds very like, I don't want to crush anybody's ideas, anybody's hopes and dreams, but you know, my goal is to have freedom. Whatever is going to give me that freedom is the thing that I'm passionate about.
So we started off those feelings that you had before you went cold turkey and separated from the job. Do those feelings go away?
What feelings?
The terror, anxiety, scare. Do they?
I think they morph. They morph.
Morph into.
It's crazy. I don't even know what to call it because I don't necessarily experience well, let me say this. I don't have like this, it's no longer overwhelming. Let me put it like that.
What part?
All of it. You know, the fear, the anxiety, you know, when you first jump off, it feels like you're literally drowning underwater. That's what it overwhelms you. And I think that after you experience it, what happens is it's almost like steps, right? So the first time you experience it, and you're still able to pay your bills and you're still able to function, you like take one step above the fear. It's always there, but eventually you start to offset it with your growing faith in God and your ability to make things happen. So I think, you know, when you first start off as an entrepreneur, you have never proven to yourself that you can make things happen without a system in place. You've never developed that muscle. You've never had to use it. So you don't know where that strength comes from. When you do it consistently over and over, you start to, just like you have faith in a system that feels very secure, but it could collapse any minute, right? You start to develop that same faith in this new system, which then is just really, you know, centralizing yourself. So it's not that it goes away, but it becomes manageable. And you're able to offset it with this growing faith that you have in yourself when you consistently make things happen. So now, you know, the first time I had an issue as a full-time entrepreneur where you get like this bill that you didn't see coming or unexpected expense, you know, you freak out, you panic. You're like, what am I going to do? And then things happen and you fix it. The 10th time that happens, it doesn't feel like the first time. So, it's still not a welcome thing, but it doesn't feel like the first time.
So describe, you know, one or two of the struggles that you see reoccurring now trying to get to the next level. So remember in the beginning, you didn't know what to expect, but at the same time, a lot of the entrepreneurs still go through the exact same thing, right? So for you right now, you're a part of our network. So the person that's listening, that's not connected to an entrepreneur in the daycare industry, that's an author, now they have the opportunity to share with you. So what are some of the struggles, reoccurring struggles that you face I would say on a weekly basis now as a current entrepreneur, former 9-to-5?
So I'll say, and this is a byproduct of how I created this business. I think because I started a business with a very like, I can do it better than anybody mentality. From the onset, a lot of the things that worked were centralized around my ability to do them, which then leads to a gap in systems, which is crucial, right? So now going back and identifying, as an entrepreneur, you're going to do 1,000 things in one day.
Yeah.
And then the next day you're going to do 1,000 things, or not the 1,000 things you did before. You're going to be wearing multiple hats.
Yeah.
And they're going to constantly change.
Yeah.
Not documenting that is going to eventually lead to a place where you have things are happening, but you're the only person who understands why they're happening.
It's all in your head.
Exactly. It's all in your head. So gaps in systems that are not impacted by people, that are self-sustaining is one. On top of that, finding people who are able to execute the things. I don't know. I always use this, and this is still unknown to me. So anybody who's listening who has the answer, let me know. But I think, people compare like the customer service of Burger King to Chick-fil-A, right? I don't know. I'm sure that the onboarding looks different to make it that somebody who goes to Burger King, your fries might be thrown at the bottom of the bag and it's just not right.
And what's onboarding for the people that don't know?
Like how you train your employees.
Okay, onboarding
how you define your culture for them, right? You clearly get two different employees, unless Burger King is going to be a sponsor of this show. I take that back. But you have a different employee. But even the Chick-fil-A employee, I don't really feel like they're probably invested like the CEO of Chick-fil-A is, right? So finding people who can execute things that you want them to execute, and figuring out how much of the vision they need to really be invested in, and how much of it is just them doing their job. So that's the two things. And then the third thing is the financial thing, right? Like dealing with the financial burdens that come with being an entrepreneur.
What type of burdens are those?
Being responsible for people and how they feed their families.
Yeah.
Unexpected expenses. It's just always crazy. And then in my industry, the governing bodies, so if you're in food, it might be the health department. With us, it's the Department of Education and people like that. But you're constantly dealing with a people problem, right? Getting people invested who work there, people who are no longer with you, or outside people creating, this extra current of things that you got to swim through.
And are these educational industry problems, you think, or
no,
all entrepreneurs? Okay.
Yeah, I think all entrepreneurs. I think trying to find people, unless you can pay people $1 million, even if you pay people $1 million a year, you got to deal with the tendencies of people, which are just ridiculous. Yeah. I think in any business, on top of you being whatever title you give yourself, you're also a manager of people. And so you're managing people, their understanding or lack thereof, their investment or lack thereof, their commitment, their problems that they bring to the workplace that happen at their houses. Like you're managing people.
Yeah.
And that is a very hard thing to do. On top of you dealing with your financial things, and then your governing bodies and external people who you answer to, because everyone answers to somebody. So figuring out like how to do all those things, I think is a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then for me, wanting to switch to passive income.
Yeah.
So I don't want to have to work at any of the things that I do. I want to be able to show up when I show up, but that's my goal. Haven't figured out the formula yet, but I want things to be self-perpetuating, to run without me necessarily having to be there every day.
Okay. And to wrap up, describe the gap right now, what it looks like of, where you are versus where you want to be, and how can we help as your network?
So I think there's always going to be gaps, maybe not as big as they should be, depending on how committed, how much self-discipline you have, but there's always going to be gaps in knowledge, because industries are forever changing, people are forever changing. So constantly being abreast to what's happening now and being knowledgeable about what's going to be happening in 5 years. You should know that right now.
Yeah.
In order to stay ahead of everybody else. So I think there's
trends.
Yeah, knowing a trend. I think there's a knowledge gap. It's definitely a financial gap in between like where you are and where you want to be. My gap is probably about 17 billion because I feel like I should have about 17 billion right now.
How can we help you get to 17 billion?
Write me a check. And I think just like, you know, I would say I'm an emerging entrepreneur in the sense that like I've only been a full-time entrepreneur for like a year. And so
but these businesses were running while you were
yeah. These were all things that were happening while I was still a 9-to-5er. And luckily when I decided to step out, they were all there to support me. But
yeah, that's good.
I think like it's very easy to get so focused on the current thing that you're never proactive. Even if you get past being reactive, you might just be, you know, it's like a spectrum. Like, am I reactive, active, proactive? I think a lot of entrepreneurs are in the active phase. Like I'm right there. I'm like keeping up the pace, but I'm not necessarily thinking about years from now. Even though it's on my vision board, even though I have it written down, I'm just trying to get through like the day. And so I think providing a space for people to go into like a reflection where they're thinking about what does this look like years from now, and how much of my time and energy am I using to do that is helpful. So I'd rank the 17 billion as number one, and then a space for the networking and the reflection as number two.
What do you mean by the reflection and networking?
Like giving entrepreneurs a chance to kind of sit back and let other people look at your business, critique it, tear it apart, and get some fresh eyes on your baby, you know, because they're gonna see things that you can't see.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So for the person out there that has the $17 billion check, that has a business already that spots trends and could be your eyes and ears, keep their head on the swivel for you, how can they get in touch with you?
So
we could put it in the show notes.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I don't know how much information you want from me.
Well, we'll just put it in the show notes then. But last question. What's the one thing you wish you knew before you got started on this journey? That night before you separated yourself, if you had the genie from Aladdin, what's the one thing that you wish you would have known?
The one thing, I guess it's fear is not the worst thing. You know, I guess it doesn't feel as bad as it feels. You know, perception versus reality. Your perception of fear is far greater than the reality of it.
Yeah, I think that's good. All right.